The 93rd Company descended to the surface of Istvaan V. Thunderhawks and stormbirds ferried the Night Lords from the void to the surface amidst the rest of the Legion. A soul count had already been made as they boarded. It was unknown if those already on the surface would fire up at them, so they made the count before leaving the void. 178 Astartes distributed among 13 squads. Of these, only one had stayed in the void, and adding to their numbers were 3 dreadnoughts. Kroshkal wanted all his screaming ghouls to take part in what was to come. He wanted to most of all, sitting in the hold of a stormbird as it screamed towards the surface. As they did, he addressed his company over Vox, more as a formality than an announcement. "Brothers, ghouls, today we make history. As all are aware, the War Master has declared that the Emperor is false, and to that our father has agreed. So have many others, and so do I. The Imperium cast us out because they deem our methods too extreme and ineffective. We will see what they say when our scalping knives and skills are turned onto them. On Istvaan V, we will make our declaration for the War Master by betraying our former allies. We all knew this when we arrived, that we would be killing Astartes. There will be a signal, a flare fired from the Sons of Horus line that will signal our betrayal. Remember, my ghouls, that we are fighting against those who have already turned their backs on us. Ave Dominus Nox." Vakal looked across the field. His mind wandered as the salamanders shambled towards their lines. He knew that there were messages going unanswered, but his eyes wandered to the other legions. He watched the front line where Fulgrim and Manus dueled. In the lines there were Emperor's children, wielding strange weapons and far from what he knew them as. They looked more like the 8th now, decorated with trophies and howling with each kill they made. Across from the screaming ghouls were word-bearers, and among them ones wearing crimson red with strange growths emerging from them. None of the other word-bearers seemed to care that their kin were so horribly mutated. In fact, some seemed to relish it. They felt wrong, an affront to humanity and Astartes as a whole. His mind faltered. A notice for communication came up on his display from another one of his squad mates. He opened the line and spoke. Markova watched the salamanders as his brothers did. They were in a poor state, and his helm lit up with targeting icons analyzing weak points. Soon, there would truly be no turning back. As the Loyalist closed, a voice came over the company Vox. "They approach, brothers. Soul count." The command squad and first O's went through without issues. Every Astartes accounting for themselves in practiced order. "Second forlorn. Tynosh, ready? Sahol, ready. Lulok, aye. Zach, here. Yark, aye. Akoras." A few moments. No response. "Sergeants, account for your squads." Markova turned, as in many of the 10th, names flashed on his display, the sounds of battle fading to him. The companies around the 93rd kept looking at the oncoming salamanders, who hoped the 8th would save them. A flare screamed into the sky far behind Markova, and gunfire erupted. Still, his mind gave voice. A single phrase. Vakal and Modrak, where are they? The sound of bolters opening fire behind them was deafening. Other weapons joined, missile launchers and volkites, among autocannons and plasma. They paid it no heed. They moved as far away from the slaughter as they could. From their peripheries, they could see other Night Lords moving backwards. The second group of bolters joined the first, undoubtedly the 93rd Company firing into the salamanders. They had time. Not much, but they had time. Modrak and Vakal moved together, brushing past slaves who dared not intervene in their lord's movements. They spotted one of the Thunderhawks with engines running, but scorned. Without hesitation, they went towards it. getting through the doors. Vakal stationed himself at the main ramp, pretending to be a guard, while Modrak ascended to the command throne to give their orders. Vakal watched as Prometheum flames responded to his traitor brothers. The salamanders were making a break for it against the screaming ghouls. As he watched the glow of flames and listened to the screams of dying Astartes, he saw Night Lords heading for them. Vakal cut his link to a squad as Modrak did the same, leaving the displays only showing each other. The first Night Lord ascended the ramp, and in a glance, they knew each other's intentions and concerns. Akaraz took a single glance back at the battle before heading further in. 12 more Night Lords boarded, many from the 8th Ghouls under the Bloody Sage. They quickly seized the Scorn and began working a clearance up to orbit under the pretense of reinforcing the Void battle. The 16th Night Lord joined them, screaming up the open ramp and parking his jet bike before dismounting and rushing to the command throne to pilot. He was the only one of the 13th Forlorn to choose loyalty. 16 Night Lords watched and listened to the battle as they made to take off. Then, the salamanders broke through. Scorn's engines screamed to full power and the secondary doors closed, leaving only the forward ramp. Vakal made eye contact with the salamander, who looked back for the briefest moment, and understood what these Night Lords were doing. The loyal sons of Vulcan began to head for Scorn as the turrets came to life. Zul, of the company's lone terror squad, rushed down the ramp and opened fire in sync with the Scorned. The rest of the Night Lords, not occupied with operating the Thunderhawk, opened fire into their brothers after a moment of hesitation. Vakal watched Zul fire without remorse, knowing the Terror Marine was laughing. He saw his brothers turning towards him, seeing Lulak aim towards the salamanders. His finger closed around the trigger, and the bolter in his hand kicked. He saw the surprise and the sluggish realization that others of the 93rd were firing at them as the first salamanders rushed onto the Thunderhawk. Bolters blazed around them as the Thunderhawk began to lift off. A few salamanders jumped onto the ramp as it closed, Zul backing in as the last man to board and at the last possible moment. Scorned turned and screamed for orbit, with a hold of Night Lords and salamanders who looked uneasily at each other. Not a word was said as missiles and anti-aircraft guns fired into the sky, aiming for the obvious Loyalist vessels. The Astartes locked within Scorn to look out through viewfinders and screens. Scorn's turrets opened fire at a few Loyalist ships, as if to kill them. In reality, every volley was precisely calculated by cogitators to cause minimal damage. Vakal counted those aboard Scorned, which was close to bursting with Astartes. 28 Loyalists in the hold and 4 on the bridge. 16 Night Lords and an equal number of salamanders in a nearly broken state. At least, it was something. In orbit above Istvaan V, a great battle was taking place. Vessels of the Salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard were fending for their lives. They were outnumbered considerably, but the nature of void warfare meant progress was slower. Aboard Black Sun, a Thunderbolt-class heavy frigate, the crew worked furiously. Some were processing what was happening, and others scrambling to keep the ship alive. They were on the very outskirts of the battle as a hunter, destined to chase any Loyalist vessels who made to break away. In reality, at least half the bridge crew wanted to flee, though none of them said it. A Vox officer turned to Captain Yegvar. The captain was an Nostroman, and while young, he had longed for the void since his earliest memories. He had watched his home die, as had the others. Most were surprised, but they had followed orders and trusted in the Primarch. Rumors of the first captain moving from ship to ship had helped expedite their firing of precious torpedoes. Now, he had been trusted to hunt down the fleeing. "Captain, Scorned hails us." "Patch her through. It's likely important." The Vox officer turned back to his station and quickly worked his console. In a few moments, the bridge speakers sputtered, and Yegvar cleared his throat. "This is Black Sun. Captain Yegvar, we are patching a clearance to you. We request to come aboard." The Vox corrupted the voice, so Yegvar could not identify which one of his lords it was. "Of course, Lord Astartes. We will be ready for you. 10 minutes, Black Sun." The Vox cut, and something in Yegvar summed something off. He quickly ordered a reception for the Astartes and handed temporary command to his first mate before rushing down to the embarkation point. It took him 9 minutes to rush through the decks, joined along the way by a few Voidsmen-at-Arms tasked with defending the ship. When he arrived, he saw Scorn touch down, though her engines stayed hot. A side door opened as there wasn't nearly enough room for the main ramp to come down. Out stepped a Night Lord, then another, and another, and another. Yigvar read the marks on their armor and quickly realized they were far from squad mates. Then, a warrior in green armor stepped out. Salamanders, here? Yigvar's mouth went dry. He had been told what was to happen on the surface as the pods descended, but to see the results for himself was something else entirely. His mind was already running with possibilities as the first Night Lord approached and stopped within arm's reach. "We are leaving, Captain Yigvar." I don't understand." "Do I need to repeat myself, Captain?" Malnyan Revok. The Nostraman phrase cleared everything in a moment, and Yigvar nodded his agreement. He quickly motioned to follow and started towards the bridge. Behind him, he heard the shuffling of flak armor and the deafening report of a bolt pistol. He didn't look back as the Astartes behind him took over. Kejar watched the void battle from Nightmare's daughter. He had purposefully stayed in orbit with orders from Kroshkal. Another had taken over his sergeant role for this battle as circumstances determined that he would be needed in the void. As the 93rd's most capable in void warfare, it was an obvious but painful choice. Kejar wanted to be on the surface and kill the Loyalists face to face to live up to his title of the Tiered. Nightmare's daughter's batteries blazed into the void, macro cannons and lances tearing into the void shields of an Iron Hands cruiser as Death's Reaper destroyed a few insignificant escorts in a well-placed volley. Kejar coordinated it all from his throne, watching a display of the layout of the battle. He almost didn't notice one of his ships peeling away from the engagement and towards the edge of the system. His eyes flicked over the display to find out which ship it was and landed on Black Sun. The escort was burning at full speed to a Mandeville point without orders. "Have any vessels escaped towards quadrant 014-392? "None, Lord. But the closest was a Raven Guard vessel, but she was hulked." "Black Sun betrays us, then. Order the 2 nearest vessels to pursue with orders to kill." "Yes, Lord." The bridge crew quickly set about to complete the orders as Black Sun turned about for the briefest of moments. It was a rapid maneuver for a void ship, and Kejar immediately understood what had happened. "Break off!" The crew seemed confused, but the helmsman complied immediately. Nightmare's daughter turned her bow towards the greater void as her engines flared with more power. Shots dissipated against her void shields as opportunist vessels turned their guns on the isolating cruiser. Their shots were returned in kind as other Night Lord's vessels jumped on the distracted Loyalist vessels. As Nightmare's daughter broke away from her primary target, Death's Reaper slowly began to follow. Unsure of her sister's intentions, she focused on the Iron Hands vessel now left alone. As the two drew near, the crew of the Night Lord's vessel saw torpedoes incoming. They tried a desperate evasive maneuver, but the Iron Hands had her blocked in, and the point defense weapons came online. Torpedoes began to explode in the void, but one made it through the hail of fire and slammed into Death's Reaper. The cruiser shuddered as a plasma warhead tore through numerous decks and sent unaware crew to their graves. She was hurt, a new gaping hole in one side and a section of her broadside destroyed. Nightmare's daughter began to descend again to protect her wounded sister, as Kejar swore. Sahiz stood in a thin layer of gore. Around him, his newfound brothers had massacred those bridge crew that had resisted their new orders. Among them were the first mate and head gunnery officer, their stations taken over by Loyalist sympathizers. He heard the slaughter through his vox as well, Salamander and Night Lord alike clearing the ship of traitors. The helmsman and navigator had quickly worked out an escape route and executed it, bringing Black Sun, her crew, and 32 Astartes away from Istvaan. Of the loyal crew, each had already torn out symbols connecting them with the traitor's 8th Legion, or somehow defaced it. Crosses, or crude representations of the Imperial Aquila, covered the winged skull. Only the Astartes, who had not yet had the time to properly deface the symbols, retained them. Yegvar turned to Sahis, having retained his command. "What now, Lord?"
"We make them bleed, Captain."
His breathing was heavy, every moment of the last few hours weighing down on him.
"We will find a sanctuary and fight back. If we are lucky, others will have escaped."
"Shouldn't we communicate the extent of the betrayal to the Emperor?"
"We will, once we find a loyal astropath. Until then, we will fight our way."
"Who will lead us? Who will we fight? How will we fight?"
"We will find out soon, Captain. We will make them pay."
That was Betrayal by the Knight of Nostramo, yours truly. I do hope you enjoyed the tale of the 93rd Company of the 8th Legion, the Screaming Ghouls, and the Loyalists who came from them. In the future, there will be tales further following these merry band of mutilators and their salamander allies, as unlikely as they may be, alongside the tale of Captain Yegvar and his ship, Black Sun. I do hope that you will listen in the future. But I still have many of those scripts to write, and if this is received somewhat positively, then I'll be sure to prioritize this band of unlikely brothers in favor of some other series that I've been considering. Regardless, I do sincerely hope you enjoyed, and farewell.